Oh, by the way, I was supposed to open with this, but with the frantic getting over here, I told my wife the name of the class was to work and to get home on time. And she said, "That's great, you should take that." So, just one caveat there, out there. Okay. I was like, "No, I'm giving it." She's like, "Oh, God." All right. So, knowing what you're doing, know this, there isn't one answer. There isn't one answer to any one architectural project. There's no one answer. This is the Kaufman House in Palm Springs. Incidentally, it's the same client that hired, this is Richard Neutra's building, but it's the same client that hired Frank Lloyd Wright to do Falling Water, interestingly enough. Frank Lloyd Wright, super genius. When they had a chance to do another house, did they go back to Frank Lloyd Wright? No, they did not. If you want repeat business, don't be in church, right? Okay. So, but that's not really why I'm pulling this one up. Neutra House. This is the same house in both pictures. Does everybody see that immediately? Okay. This, the one on the right was like the cover of Life magazine at some point in the 1960s. Just talking about the California lifestyle. That other image is probably one of my favorite color photographs of all time. Daytime, it's about 15 feet over from the first one. I think the difference between these two images, considering the only thing that's changed is the vantage point and the lighting in these two images, and obviously one's black and white, one's color. They're both great answers to the same problem. They're both great answers to the same piece of architecture. You just know what you're doing, like and that comes with practice. And I'm not trying to be facetious about it, but there is no one answer to what the best image for your piece of architecture is going to be. So I think you need to keep that in mind, all right, because that will come back when we start talking about our workflow. There is no one answer. Like you sitting there pounding your hand and saying, to the client, it has to be this way, it has to be this way, it has to be this way. You have to choose your spots where you do that, because there really is no one answer. Like you can get great images, you can get great images doing it in different ways. But there are a bunch of answers always to any one, well, not always, but there are usually some answers to any image that you can choose to do. And fundamentally for me, when I'm looking at work and when I'm saying that's good or that's bad, at some level, those people have thought. When I say good, at some level, those people have thought about how the eye travels through the canvas. And that, and that's it. And some people don't even realize that they're doing it, and they're great. Some people don't even realize that they're doing it, and they're great. And some people are clearly they know that they're doing it, and they're great. So, but fundamentally, that's what I'm looking at. When I look at the distinction, I talked to Jeff at some length about what people really want to get out of this class. Like, how do you take it to that next level? He's like, we want all these people are saying, we want to take it to the next level. The next level is not that complex. The next level is you need to think about these things as canvases and not necessarily as 3D models. That's it. This is the age group of who are in our industry. And you can see junior artists, 20, 29, right? What is it? Does that say 29? Does that say 20? Anyway. It's, yeah. You guys know what Jeff meant, though, right? So basically, our industry is 85% people's in their 20s and their 30s. Now, part of that is the age of the technology, and I fully am cognizant of that. But you see, and we have personally seen, droves of people that have come through our office, and then they get out. Has everybody else seen that? They get out of the industry. No? I mean, the graph here is pretty clear that we're not alone in that situation, right? That people, once they start getting into their 30s, they start having families, that fundamentally they get out of our industry. And because, and I can only surmise this because we're not exceptionally well paid, right? We have some fun, but we're not exceptionally well paid. We also have this situation where we're just absolutely always dependent on what the client last said to us. And if your people know what they're doing, those junior artists know what they're doing, you can make that 15-minute geometry change run it through as an XREF, save it off as an XREF, and then just restart the pass, and the whole thing is there, right? And the turnkey, and the end of the day, project manager responsibilities become so turnkey as far as I don't have to open up anything, I don't have to send anything. I just need to go in, I need to pull up monitor, and I need to restart passes. You can do that from your phone, right? Okay. Let's take a look at a couple things that probably should mention. When we looked at this base pass, what we did with these elements here is usually we run a bunch of multi-mat elements, and you'll see that when Gordon pulls up the file later today, and probably in the neighborhood of usually we provide room for like 35 object IDs in order to be able to just adjust, like adjustment layers in Photoshop, right? Adjustment layers in Photoshop. So what those are dependent on, though, is your end people using object IDs for their objects that they're making. Everybody knows how to do it. We found the best way to do it really is that you give your junior artists, like you're allowed to use 1 through 12 and let them make the best determination of how those object IDs are then deployed in their scenes. Because your junior artists are the ones that are fundamentally making all of the XREFs, right? So you give them, you give each of them you give each of them some number to be able to do. We tried to do it at first where it was just like, these types of objects would be this number, this type of object would be that number, and it just one of the things about this method is having it run a shop for this long. This is our 21st year. The amount of energy that we've expended on trying to get people to follow layer standards and follow object naming standards. Has everybody been there? Yeah. Did I mention object names once? You're giving your junior artists also flexibility to model as fast as they know how to model. Give them the latitude to be able to model this thing out. And then the senior artist will take a look at the passes and say, hey, Josh, I really need an object ID on this. I need an object ID on this. So it completes the batch. And what that did is that it went through the base directory and it looked at all these files. And it said if you have an invisible version of one of those files, it'll update it. And what it does is it just goes through all those objects in that base file, and it opens them up. It goes through all of the objects that are in that XREF, and it makes them invisible. Then it senses what other ones from the base directory are in the mat, and it opens up all of those objects, and it tells it, make it a V-Ray mat object. You open up, go into your machine, you open up Max, you run that script on the directory. You have now mat versions of of the scenes that you need mat versions of. You have invisible versions of the scenes you have invisible of. And then you come into your monitor and you activate. That's it. So the idea is then it gets rendered overnight. Passes appear next morning for the senior artists. They cobble them together, send them off to the client, and you do it again.
So basically, you can see here on the right have all of the different passes. These are all the the object ID passes. Some of them are blank right now because it's, again, very early stages, so not everything has been addressed at this point. We have a clay pass, which is just gray render, which comes in handy for various purposes. Lights on pass, which you can see there's almost no difference. There's something back here. I'm not sure what that is, but the XREFs basically have no lights in the scene at this point. There's the lights on pass, GI pass, nothing else. Then our regular base pass, and a slew of other passes. And a lot of times, this project had I don't know, maybe 6 to 10 views. I can't remember exactly. So the XREFs are set up in such a way that all of these passes will be handy for all the views. So there may be other views that utilize some of these passes that aren't used in this actual shot. But when I get this, I will take a quick look at the passes, see if there's anything overly weird coming up. Like back in this little area, there's some blobby white mess. There's some strange mapping on these bricks at the top. You know, a lot of things. And this is early in the process, so it's to be expected. So you can see there's, you know, I haven't been very careful with masking or anything. I'm just trying to fill in this space with a little bit of fake light, just to kind of take a look at what it could look like. It's not, this is like a loose sketch of where this will go in the long run. And since we have all these mask layers here, the multi-mats, I can hop in and select various items in the file. So, for example, the railings and metal are all red. Some of them overlap a little bit, but not too bad. And to select these, you go into the channel menu, and you have your red, green, and blue, and they become their own alpha based on the colors in the scene. So it makes it really easy to make a quick selection from those elements. And a lot of our files will have heaps of those different masks to choose from. So it keeps you from having to go and trace out in Photoshop lots of little layers and tons of pieces. It can be a huge time saver in the end. And again, this file is being its infancy, so none of that stuff is quite prepped yet.
Anything that is in your red buffer, you're going to turn that, you're going to make sure that you render your red buffer, and it's going to be slot number 1. You're going to say, I want my green buffer on, and it's going to be slot number 2. And then you want your blue buffer on, check, and then that's going to be slot number 5. Now, so that's how you do object IDs. Go ahead, David. Oh, sorry.
My question is, do you set up these object IDs often based on the material on the object, so that you can grab all the brick at once or all the wood paneling? Or
yeah, there are a couple ways to do it. So what you can do is, so that's if you're doing object IDs, you can do it that way. Multi-mat as an element actually works as another way too. So if I render another element multi-mat, this second one I'm not going to key into the object IDs. The second one, I'm going to key into material IDs. So for this one, what we're going to do is we'll make it another, let's see, let's go back up here for a second.
So like if I draw on the mask for the GI pass, it'll give me shadows that just work across everything. So if I have to comp in people or cars or plants, the shadows should all work really nice. And let's say I have the cars, let's pretend this crazy layer is the cars pass, the car shadows, and then you want tree shadows. You can just make another GI pass and paint those on the other GI pass. Oops. And it looks exactly the same and blends, so you don't have to worry about overlapping shadows for your 2D people or your cars or your trees or whatever random things you want to add to your image. The shadows all work together. So this would be, like, for example, people shadows. They all blend together, so you don't have any overlapping shadows, but you can turn them on and off as you need to. So if I want to turn off my people shadows or my plant shadows, this is a really good example. Look at this thing. So anyway, it's a really, really great pass to be able to take advantage of when you need it. But this image just doesn't really have that much in there right now. This is the real lights on pass. Here we go. I don't know why this extra lights on pass is in here. I'm going to get rid of it. I don't know if you can see on my screen. I'll turn it on and off. It just kind of helps, feel like there's a little air catching some lights, a little bit of dust in the air. If you want some God rays, you could always just draw them in like real brutal and, make them just come in like this. And it looks crazy, but you can make these look pretty good if you are careful with them. This is going to be, like I said, a brutal example. And you use gradient to soften them up, but I don't use these too often. Let me see if I still have a blur up at the top of my filter. Yeah. Every once in a while this can come in handy, but it's a little bit overkill generally. Color. This works really good on, I don't know, a lot of exterior kind of buildings. I like to do a gradient from like blue to orange, just random, and put it really, really faint over the whole image. And it kind of warms up the ground a little bit, but cools out the sky, and it cools up the glass that's higher up, and it gives the impression of some warm bounce, even though it's completely fake. This is just a little trick that can come in really handy. Let me see. Also, RGB curves, individual curves in RGB there. Why isn't this? Oh, I see. Sorry. So you can come into the green channels, or this is even affecting the image. It's going. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of lag here, so it's kind of over going the what I want it to. But you can see how you can turn up and down the red and green in the curves layers. This is really handy too, because you can get very specific on where you change your colors. It's a nice way to play with the balance a little bit.
You know, I mean, it's not rocket science. You know, it's like you're going to get a lot of nice sharp. You're going to get a lot of nice contrast. You're going to be able to control the lighting because it's spotlighting and not everything is underneath the thing of the sun. So if you're and they're the most powerful images. Evening views are always the most powerful, and they reveal the least about the building itself. So we always recommend, if you don't know anything, if you want to win the competition, do the evening view, right? If you want to do the evening view. Leonardo da Vinci observed, and he's right. And you can see it in some of the yellow-orange color overlay that Gordon just used. I'm gonna, the exact quote is going to desert me, but there is the quote was to the effect that end of the day sun is the most beautiful time to render the human skin. And it's because everything is imparted with that yellow light from the sun. Like if you want something beautiful, just put the sun near the horizon. It's going to take care of itself. I mean, it'll look good. Unless you put it right behind you, then you're going to get a flashbulb. But like, put the sun near the horizon, let it get yellow, orange. It's going to be beautiful. Problem is your clients are going to come back and say it doesn't look like the material board. That's the issue. But if you want beauty, then then that end of the day sun is really kind of the most glorious. Like the mirror visual that we looked at earlier. That's really one of the most beautiful. Noonday suns are basically the noonday suns are the refuge of the wicked. I mean, like that's just death. I mean, it's just awful. Like you just don't want to do that if you can all help it. Have you ever met that client? Because if you have, then I'm going to try and steal them from you. Okay? Because fundamentally, like it or not, there are a few geniuses. Like there are a few geniuses out there. People get paid, and the geniuses get paid for what they just bring to the table. I think we bring a lot to the table. I don't mean to diminish, our artists or our, or our method or anything. I think we bring a lot to the table, but fundamentally, like I do not have the ego to go in and tell my clients, like, no, you said that date was done. It's set in stone, and like go pound sand, right? Like I don't have that ego to be able to do that. So I think that I think the question comes back to done. When is it done? When is it done, right? There needs to be a recognition that if your client still has time, they're not done. Like, they're not done. Now, you can say to them, but that's no excuse for you not being a businessman. You say, you know what, you told me the 27th. I have other stuff that's really right now on my schedule. I can't keep going on this, especially for free. I would love to do the work because I think it's really getting great, and I'm more than happy to put the brass tacks in for you. But I do need to charge you for the time. And then you've just made yourself more money. Like, if they want to play, then they should pay for that opportunity to play. I mean, it's not like, and I think you need to be sensitive about when you do that. You don't want to be doing that to your best client that that your business doesn't get by. You know, your business doesn't get by if you piss them off, right? But for that first-time client that's really being a little crazy, unreasonable, like, you need to do it. You just need to do it. None of this is an excuse for you not being a businessman. Like, what it does is it allows you as the senior artist to be able to take a set of passes and make a couple different views, so that way you can study it real quick and leverage all the assets really pretty darn quickly. So if they don't like it, like, you can actually start to move it around a lot, you know, and have a dramatic effect. You know, if you were doing that in 3D, going from a daytime to a nighttime, like, and it was all 3D, right? I mean, come on, like, you know, like, you would be losing money. And I do need to go back and say that it not being done, that asymptote, is only tolerable if you have video layers. It was complete. I would be in your spot asking the same question if we didn't use video layers. Using video layers changes your life. It absolutely changes your life. Okay? There's, like, instead of spending an hour and a half every morning bringing in passes to your PSD file, you open the PSD file and they are there. Changes your life. Swear to God. Don't render patches.
You talked. Is this on? You talked about. I mean, I know it's a good hack to zoom out to be able to quickly judge values.
Yeah.
Like, you can zoom out and you can get a really quick idea of contrast and values. Do you have any tips as far as quick tricks for color balance? Judging that.
It is tough. I have a tendency to, I like stuff like overly saturated. And I like to view other people's things that are a little less saturated. So it's a taste thing more than anything else. And honestly, it's kind of weird. Like, what I like to make, and we have clients that like the things that I make, even though I tend to gravitate toward other people's stuff that's less like my own. Does that make sense? So it becomes
no. I mean, like, unrealistic lighting actually makes it moodier. It makes it a more like emotional image. But, you know, you don't always have the opportunity to do that depending on who your client is.
Exactly. Sometimes it's got to be a little more reel it in, you know, like you're going too far. That's, but I don't know. I mean, it's pretty much all fake. That's the thing, again, with viewing these video layers, I could go scrap all that daylight stuff and go to just the GI pass and fake in like these values. And with the colors, you know, let me see where my overlays I just made. I mean, these are relatively saturated, and I could turn that down quite a bit so it's not quite so unrealistic. And my preference is to usually go overboard and then have somebody pull me back, like, Gordon, stop. You're breaking everything, you know. So you can reel it back a bit. But I like these, just a color overlay on soft light. Just, you can control the percentage and kind of give you some bloomy color. And then just you know, at the end, you can do a hue saturation layer on the top, and utilize these individual layers, because if you just knock down the master, you know, it gets it's too gray, scaly looking. But, you know, like, the yellows look too bright to me in this. The yellows are too saturated, so I can just turn down the yellows and maybe the reds just a tad, and then my blues kind of stay in the same place. And I don't know what it looks like up there. Let me make it a little bigger, so I'm not being ridiculous here. All right. And so, you know, you can kind of see it. But I don't know. Is that help answer your question at all, or are you giving more toward anything else?
It's subjective, is what you're telling me.
It's completely subjective, and between different artists and different clients, and, you know, it goes back and forth. And like I said, like, I tend to initially make things much more saturated than they probably need to be, and then if I don't reel them back myself, someone else usually will. Like, having people watch me work is strange for me, because I'm used to experimenting a bunch and then not showing anybody until I'm like, this looks decent, you know. So having everybody see me go through my phases it's interesting for me. But yeah, it is totally subjective. Client may love or hate what you do. So you just kind of base it on, you know, if you can hit a middle ground. Sometimes you can push it a little bit and see if they like it. And if they don't, you can just reel it back a little bit. But it's very easy to do. It took, all of 15 seconds to go from, an overly saturated, very cartoony to a little less saturated, a little bit more realistic kind of scheme, So it's easy to adjust, I think. And it's all relative, and there's a ton of other tricks here. I think I got an online question here. Let me look again really quickly. If I make sure I didn't lose this. All right. Oops. See what I'm doing here. Got a couple here. Sanja, hope I'm saying that correctly. Could you please show us how you would add some people? Sure. All right. So I think I brought some here. I'm going to actually convert this back to my daytime view because it'll probably be a little easier to work out. But while I'm at it, I'm going to save this so we can look at it again in a little bit and compare what's doable in a short time as opposed to rendering all these different things and taking many, many hours to work this out. All right. So I'm going to clean up a few of these junk layers that I made. Don't want that. Got one more question back here.
So one of the problems that we have at our studio is, or we were trying to standardize the layers in Photoshop so that we could have different senior artists finished renderings that another senior artist started but got stuck in another project. Do you usually have the same senior artist to start and finish the same project, or do you have some sort of standardization of layers and management of layers in Photoshop so that they don't get crazy trying to understand what's happening?
It's kind of what John was saying earlier with the 3D files, where there's not really a standard. We try our best to keep everything organized and layered. And I'm actually skipping a lot. So you can ask John, I'm pretty good about organizing my files. So if I hand them off, someone can get around there. And the senior artists in general are relatively good at keeping them organized in a way where you can get around them. We don't quite have the same workflow as far as what we do in Photoshop, but if I pick up one of their files, I'm not overly lost. I can usually, they name their layers. Again, my thing that I like is the color coding. And it really helps me, but not everybody does it, but as long as they're named, things are attached in a way where it's easy to get around, I'm generally okay with that. And what would you say?
Yeah, there absolutely is not a straitjacket that we expect people to follow. So that generally we have groups of stuff. We have groups of things that kind of, you're going to have this, you're going to have your base layers, then you're going to have some adjusts, and then you're going to have your glass layers, then you're going to have some adjusts, and you're going to have your entourage layers, and then you're going to have some adjusts, and then you're going to have your finishing layers. So, and down at the very bottom of that is you have your background layers, right? I mean, so some people decide to put masks all the way up at the top because that makes life easier for them. Some people like to have the masks in the various groups with them. Generally speaking, we encourage logical Photoshop files. Like, even if you prefer to work it in a certain way, inevitably there is a real emphasis on making sure that it is understandable. Now, we do like to let people work the way they want to work. In the same way that the XREF files, we're not strict about it because we know different people like to work different ways, and so we want to make sure that we're getting the best out of them. We want to make sure that they're the most comfortable in the way they want to do it. So we have some general things that we want to do. One thing that you're not seeing here that we definitely like to have, and this is really just because we have just one screen, we like it where all of the groups and all of the layers that don't sit in groups all fit in a screen. Like, so if you collapse them all, you can see all of the groups that are there and all of the freestanding. Like, there's nothing worse than trying to scale back. Like, we typically do have 100+ layers by the time all's said and done. But when you collapse the groups, et cetera, that we like that list to just fit on one screen, so that you're not doing what Gordon is having to do right now. That's really our only. That and it should be logical. Like, you should be building up from the bottom. You should be approaching it like a painter, and building it from the back to the front. But there's no, you have to call it this, you have to color it this. There's none of that.